Everyone just go around and introduce themselves since this is going to be a little bit more informal. Start with Dr. Tuttle.
And Andrea, Tuttle, Superintendent.
Roy Bishop, Deputy Superintendent.
Trustee Klepp.
Trustee Sean Tuttle.
Trustee Level.
Trustee Ginny Jeup. Trustee Colleen. Trustee Valarie St. John.
Trustee Clint, Derringer.
Fantastic. Good to see you all. My name is Bennet. I'm the Assistant Director for Executive Search Services at the Michigan Association of School Boards. My main role with MASB is around superintendent search, superintendent evaluation, and then I also do a variety of workshops with boards across the state. I am a former board member myself, having served on my local board in Grand Ledge, just outside of Lansing, also on my Eaton Resa board, so I served on both a local and an ISD board, and I am a former middle school and high school special education teacher, so I've been involved in education in one way, shape, or form for more years than I care to think about. So I'm going to pass around a sign-in sheet. So just kind of take a look at the information that's there. If you see anything needs to be corrected, go ahead and correct it. Initial it so that you all get credit for attending this workshop tonight. So we're talking about working as an effective governance team. Before we get rolling here, let's just, a couple reminders. Let's be engaged. Let's listen for understanding, respect each other's viewpoints. Let's make sure that we've got our cell phones and whatnot silenced. Respect airtime. Give everyone an opportunity to speak. Anything else that we need to think about as we're getting ready to engage in this workshop around ground rules? Okay. All right, so how are we feeling? On the sheep scale here, 1 through 9, what are we thinking?
4.
4, okay.
I like 6.
6, all right. We'll spring the step there. You know, it's fantastic out there today. I'm feeling a little bit of 3 right now. I've got 2 searches going on. I've got 10 others that I'm helping out with. Workshops. Was in Dearborn last night, Grosse Pointe tonight, so I'm feeling a little bit of 3 myself. But I'm glad I'm here. All right. So remembering that a team is a group of people with different backgrounds, skills, personalities, and styles with a common purpose who are working together to achieve clearly identified goals. We have a ton of research that tell us that those districts that are most effective at increasing student academic achievement are those districts in which a superintendent and a board are all working together on the same goals. We have a clearly defined set of goals for the district. The superintendent and the board have set those goals. The superintendent has pledged these are the ways that we're going to achieve these goals. The board supports the superintendent in that. We all work together to complete those goals. Those are the districts that are moving the academic needle. Those are the districts that are increasing graduation rate. Those are the districts that are increasing reading proficiency, math scores, science scores, all of it. Superintendent, board, coming together, working as an effective governance team. A team is not a group of people that work together. A team is a group of people that trust each other. All right, so I'm sure some of you have probably seen Tuckman's 5 stages of group development before. Forming, storming, norming, performing. Where do we think we are as a governance team, as a board and superintendent? Where do you think we fall here? Do we think we're in this forming where we're kind of just a group of individuals with no clear purpose? Do we think we're in the storming area where we've got some power struggles? We're trying to seek understanding of our contributions. Norming, where we understand the values, we reach agreement on how to do things, we understand our roles, we understand individual responsibilities, or are we at this level of performing, where we're aligned to a team vision and purpose, we're able to understand our individual and team value, we're able to focus on getting things done in a way that aligns to our team values, and we have some healthy conflicts. So where do we think we are right now as a team? What do you think, Tim?
I can't imagine that we're anywhere beyond forming.
Okay.
I'm not even sure that we collectively have an ambition to operate as a team.
Okay. Others?
I thought storming after doing it originally.
Okay.
I think that there's some effort to seek understanding, some effort to that, but I would say power struggles and conflict dominate.
Okay.
And that's, current, but also kind of beset by history, short-term history and long-term history. It's not necessarily just in this room.
All right. Other thoughts?
I agree with Clint, I don't think we're at any understanding that, so we're not to norming. I would say somewhere between forming and storming. Because there is like the seek, I think we all are still optimistically seeking those things within storming. That doesn't sound optimistic to say storming, but.
Sure. Other thoughts? So I think the fact that we're here tonight, that we're talking about this, that we're acknowledging this, puts us in a space where we're at least acknowledging that we've got some work to do, right? And so I think that, in that forming, storming area, we definitely have some work to get up into that norming, performing area. And so hopefully after we finish up tonight, we'll have some ideas on what we can do to move forward and get us closer to that norming and performing, because that's ideally where we want to be. Where we have a clear understanding of what it is that we're all trying to do, we're working together, trusting each other as a team to get there. Okay? All right, so when we talk about an effective governance workshop, or effective governance framework, it starts with having a unity of purpose. Okay, we need to have a clear idea of what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. As a board, as a governance team, as a district, what is our unity of purpose? Now, for me, a fairly universal unity of purpose is preparing our kids for what's next. Okay? For some of those kids, it's going to be college. For some of those kids, it's going to be the military. For some of those kids, it's going to be right into the workforce. It's going to be the ever-dreaded gap year. Whatever it is, what are we doing to prepare our kids for what's next? The reason that I like that as kind of a universal is because it covers everybody. Everyone's going to have a different what's next. And we're doing everything we can to prepare them for whatever it is that is next. Sometimes I get some pushback from boards talking about, well, we're preparing every kid for college. Not every kid's going to go to college. And that's absolutely fine. But if we prepare them for college and they don't actually end up going to college, are they really that worse off? No, because we prepared them for college. They decided not to go to college, but they've come out of our district with a pretty healthy set of academic and social and everything else, because we prepared them for something that they ended up not wanting to do. They ended up doing something else, going another route, and that's fine. But we've prepared them for something that is effective. So we need to think about what it is that our unity of purpose here in Grosse Pointe is. Roles and responsibilities. Once we've defined what that unity of purpose is, once we've defined what those goals are that we're going to be working on, then we need to figure out whose roles and whose responsibilities they are. So generally speaking, as a board, we're kind of big picture, okay? We set forth that vision for the district, and then we allow our superintendent and her team to create that mission, that day-to-day. All right, so as a board, this is what we're thinking about. This is what the next 3 to 5 years look like. As an administrative team, a superintendent and her team, these are the things we're going to do to get there in the next 3 to 5 years. All right, and so those roles and responsibilities. As a board, we're here to support administration in the things that they're putting forth, right? They are the professional educators. That's what we've hired them to do. That's what we've hired our superintendent to do. That's what our superintendent has hired everybody else to do, is to support our unity of purpose, to support those goals that we've set forth as a board. And so now we need to, as a board, support her in any way that we can, through the amendments that we make to the budget, through our spending priorities, through our policies that we have as a board and district. All those things that we need to do to support our superintendent. We need to think about how we can have that positive governing body culture, setting those norms that we have as a board. We can think about the norms that we kind of already have in place. We can think about precedents. This is the way that we've done things in the past. We can then decide if we want to continue to do the way things that they've always been done, or if we want to make some changes to set our own precedents, right? That's something that we as a board can think about. It's worked for us in the past. Will it work for us in the future? Maybe, maybe not. Do we need to make some changes along the way? So precedence is definitely something we need to think about. The current policies that we have in place. Are we familiar with the current policies that we have in place? Are we following the current policies we have in place? Are the current policies we have in place working for us? And if they're not, then what are we doing to change the policies? I don't want you as a board to ignore a policy or violate a policy. If it's not working for you, change it. Rewrite it. Have somebody rewrite it for you. Lean on your Troon or whoever is providing you policy, Neola, whoever is providing you policy, Troon, Neola, which
Collins and Black.
Collins and Blaha, there you go.
Arkill.
So if you don't like the policies you've got, lean on Collins and Blaha to write your new policies or work with you to rework the policies. I'd rather you rework your policies than completely violate or ignore your policies. That's just poor board governance. We have policies in place for a reason. Policies is where a board lives, okay? And so if the policies aren't working for us, then we'll talk about, as a board, what we need to make changes to, and then we'll go through that process of making those changes to the policy. Supportive structure and process, those protocols. So if we decide we're going to go that route of looking at our policies, making some changes and amendments to our policies, then we want to make sure we follow the protocols that we have in place. So generally speaking, when boards receive a new policy, it's fairly common for them to take a first reading of the policy. So something that is introduced to the board, here's a new policy that we're thinking about. The board takes some time to read over the policy, think about the policy, and then sets a meeting to then formally have a second reading and adoption of policy. And between those two meetings, between the first reading of the policy and the second reading of the policy, we get our questions answered. We work with our superintendent on questions that we may have. We work with Collins and Blaha on questions that we may have. We get those questions answered, make any adjustments that we need, and then we bring forth that policy for a second reading. And after that second reading, we generally then take a vote, and we either adopt the policy or we don't. That's a general protocol. If that's the way that we're going to do it, then we need to make sure that's the way we do it every time. Follow those protocols, make sure those protocols are followed consistently. So if our protocol is first reading, get our questions answered, second reading, and then vote, then that's the process we're going to follow every time we have a new policy in front of us. Okay? So once we have those protocols in place, we need to make sure that we're following those protocols consistently. We're setting an example for how we want everything else to happen in the district. Okay? You have protocols around what happens when an employee has some sort of misconduct, right? So if an employee is found to be guilty of, and I'm just throwing this out there for the sake of whatever, but embezzlement, right? We found an employee that we think is guilty of some embezzlement. We have protocols to follow to do our investigation, to make sure that we are correct in our assumption, that we have the information and the evidence that we need to then follow the steps to dismiss this employee, okay? We have protocols in place. So every time we have to deal with an employee disciplinary issue, we're going to follow those protocols. That is something that as a board, I'm assuming, and I know what they say about assuming, going to do it anyway, but I'm assuming that you would, believe and support your superintendent and HR in following those protocols, because that's what we have in place. So as a board, we need to do the same thing. Okay, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if we as a board would expect our administration to follow protocols, then as a board, we need to do that ourselves as well. We need to be the example. Okay. Any questions about any of the things here? Unity of purpose, roles and responsibilities, culture, protocols, norms. Do we have, as a board, a set of board norms? Do we adopt any kind of formal set of board norms at the beginning of our sessions, say in January when we do organizational meeting? Do we all agree to follow any kind of board norms or anything along those lines?
It was on the agenda and we need to vote on it next time.
Okay.
Yeah, we decided to do the onboarding training first since we have so
Okay.
many new trustees. But
Okay.
for the past 2 years, we haven't had any norms.
Okay. And how are we feeling about that?
I think we need norms.
Okay.
I think it makes sense to onboard first.
Okay. All right.
What do you think about establishing norms for boards?
I think it's important. I think it sets an example that we as a board have a set of norms that we've adopted. We're going to follow those norms. It helps our meetings run smoother. It helps reflect better upon the community that as a group of elected officials, we have set these norms for our behaviors and for our protocols and our policies. We're going to follow those. It makes everything a little cleaner. We know what to expect because we've agreed to these norms. Holding each other accountable to those norms. We have now a set of expectations that we can hold each other accountable for. As a board, we are responsible for policing ourselves and policing each other to make sure that we're representing the district in a way in which is positive and effective and everything else. I mean, we're the ones under the spotlight. We're the ones that are elected. We're the ones that are showing up to the board meetings every time, taking the votes, passing the policies, passing the budget, all those things. And so we want to make sure that we're projecting ourselves as a group of trained volunteers that have the best interests of the district and the community and the staff in mind, the students, and everything we can do to project that positive is a win for us. Especially in this age of, we've got schools of choice, we have, at some point, we're always hiring employees, right? And so we want to be that district that is attractive to those employees that are looking to come and work for us. And trust me when I tell you, they're watching your board meetings, okay? They're doing their homework. When they decide, okay, you know what, I'm coming out of Michigan State, I'm coming out of U of M, I'm coming out of Western, go Broncos, I want to be a teacher in Grosse Pointe, I'm going to investigate that district and make sure that that's a place that I want to go work. And if they tune in to the board meetings and see dysfunction, okay, well, let's see what else is out there, right? And so it's one of those things we need to think about. Our students, we want our students to, see those positive interactions from, from our board members. It all trickles down. If the board is not doing well, if there's dysfunction amongst the board, the administration is generally not happy. If the administration is not happy, then the teachers aren't happy. If the teachers aren't happy, that eventually makes its way down to the students. It definitely rolls downhill from the top. There's no doubt. And so we need to, again, as a board, as a superintendent, make sure that we're coming together, following those protocols we set forth, following those norms we set forth, all working towards those goals.
Are there other, just on the roles and responsibilities, do you have suggestions about, because for me personally, that's what I'm trying to really sort of understand.
Yeah.
At what point do I might be crossing a line, or where exactly is the line?
Yeah, and we'll definitely dig into roles and responsibilities a little bit in a little bit, in a little more depth, for sure. Okay, so as we talked about, this unity of purpose, common focus, superordinate goals, values and beliefs, school district public education that help us transcend our individual difference to fulfill that greater purpose, right? So we all have that purpose together. Those roles and responsibilities, those values that respect our essential roles, making sure that we understand what is our role, what is the administration's role, and we'll get into that in a little bit. All right, so here we go. These roles for the board. Setting the direction of the district. That is your role as a board, setting the direction for the district. Ensuring accountability, holding administration accountable for those goals that we set. Holding each other as a board responsible for those goals that we've set, right? So if we have a set of goals that we're working on, we need to get regular updates from our administration as to the progress that's being made towards those goals. So if, for instance, we decide, just off the top of my head, we decide that for this year, one of the things we're going to focus on is increasing reading proficiency amongst our elementary school students. All right? We set that goal, whatever it is, we work with administration to set that goal because, again, we want to lean on our professional educators to determine whether, what goal is appropriate. We set that goal, and then we need to get regular updates from our superintendent. Okay, so we set that goal for reading proficiency, what's going on? Well, we sent our teachers to professional development. They've learned that this program. Well, why that program? Well, this program is something that's been used in countless other districts across the state. They've seen their reading numbers, their reading proficiency climb, so we believe this is a good program, so we sent our teachers to get trained in it. Okay, several months pass, another update, all right? So we've had the teachers trained, we've got the first round of tests have come in, test results have come in, and so we have a baseline now, we know where our kids are, so in a couple months we'll take another round of tests and I'll report back to you what the proficiency is looking like between that first round and second round of tests. So a couple months, okay, we've done second round tests now we know this is what our baseline is, and this is the percentage of students that have increased above the baseline, or meeting proficiency, whatever it is. And so as long as we're getting those regular updates along the way, and as a board we're satisfied with the progress that's being made, then we are ensuring that accountability. We're making sure that as a board that we're holding ourselves and our administration accountable for whatever goal it is that we set, all right? We're gonna establish those structures. We're gonna make sure we have those policies and protocols in place for providing, for instance, money for professional development, providing money for substitute teachers, providing money for curriculum, computers, books, whatever it is that we need. We're going to demonstrate that community leadership. We're going to actively be talking about reading proficiency to our, to our communities, to our teachers, to our staff. We're going to be talking about it in our board meetings. We have established increasing reading proficiency as one of the goals for the year, and this is what we're doing, this is how it's working, this is what's happening. We're going to make sure that we're demonstrating that community leadership. Maybe we're going to even volunteer and come into some of our buildings and read with our elementary school kids. Whatever it is we're going to do, we're going to make sure that we're demonstrating that community leadership. We're going to develop those positive relationships with each other and with our administration and support them in these endeavors that we've set forth. If we as a board decide that increasing reading proficiency is something that we want to achieve, work with the superintendent to set those goals, then we've got to support them. We've got to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support the goals that we've set. So when we talk about visions and values, our superintendent's role is to support and assist the board in kind of developing that vision, recommending the process and how we're going to create that, gathering that input on our community values and our core beliefs, and then advising the board on how we create that vision and test it, and then making sure that we have a communication plan in place to provide updates. As a board, you're going to adopt that vision. You're going to help to achieve, make sure that it reflects our high expectations for quality teaching and student learning, while making sure that we're incorporating the value and core beliefs of the community. This is going to look a little different in every district, okay? And we need to make sure that it's what we support here in our district. So in this vision and values, superintendent helps in setting the vision, board approves the vision, superintendent says this is how we're going to get there, board says sounds fantastic, let's go. Board is then getting regular updates from the superintendent as to the progress being made towards that vision. When it comes to setting the goals, how we're going to meet that vision. Vision, big overarching. Mission, day to day. Goals, how we're achieving that day to day to then eventually achieve the vision. So the superintendent is going to assist and advise the board in creating those long and short-term goals. We're going to establish that plan for district-wide implementation. We're going to then periodically report that progress. The board is then making sure that that district vision is translated into long and short-term goals, that the resources and systems are aligned, and that we hold the system accountable to those goals. So, strategic plan process. Have we done one recently? We're in the process of doing one. We're thinking about it. We don't. What's going on with strategic planning?
We do not have an up-to-date strategic plan in Grosse Pointe.
Okay.
I think our most recent one expired.
At the end of last year.
Okay.
Need one.
So this is something that, as a board, we decided that we're looking to engage in a planning process of some sort.
Yes, we have a bond we need to get through first, and then I think that's the next step on the agenda.
Okay. All right. Good deal. So strategic plans, usually we're talking a 3 to 5 year process. We're usually looking at somewhere around, 5 to 6 kind of what I like to refer to as BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, right? We've got those 5 or 6 big goals that we're working on. And then underneath those 5 or 6 goals, we've got all kinds of subsets, all kinds of mini goals. So if the goal is, and sometimes those big, hairy, audacious goals, when you start to engage in that process of strategic planning, I don't want you to get too hung up on the fact that sometimes those major goals are kind of not all that clearly defined. That's okay, because it's going to be the goals underneath that are kind of defined. So we can have a fairly nebulous, if you will, goal of increasing academic achievement, right? That sounds kind of touchy-feely, right? But it's important to increase academic achievement, and then underneath that, then we're going to start digging into it. So I can think of a district I was working with in which increasing academic achievement was their goal, and then their focus was going to be on math. And the reason their focus was going to be on math is because in their previous plan, their focus was on reading. And they had a pretty robust reading program in place, and their reading scores were through the roof. They were like, okay, so now we're going to take that same kind of process that we used to increase reading, and now we're going to focus on math, okay? And the general belief is that if we focus, one of the reasons we always talk about reading math, it's kind of hard to do the science without the reading and the math. It's kind of hard to do the social studies without the reading. And so if we focus on reading and math and get those to where we want them to be, then the hope is that the social studies and the science kind of fall into place because we've got that foundation for them, right? And so that's why we have districts that kind of focus on the reading and the math. And so big goal is increasing academic achievement. Smaller goal is we're going to focus in on math because we've done all the research. We know that that's something that we're lacking in this district. And then underneath that, okay, so now we know that we're working on math, so what are we going to do in order to get the math to where we want it to be? Professional development, curriculum, training, whatever it is, okay? And so, again, working as a board and a community and a staff to figure out what those goals are.
So a question about how specific to get in that Is it just, have professional development to improve math, or would you want something specific, like, our goal is to get 2/3 of students achieving proficiency in math?
Yeah, so we can dig, and every layer that we go down is gonna be more and more specific.
So
So-
it would be appropriate to put that in the strategic plan, like a specific number? That's not too.
So normally what we're going to do is we're going to establish those 5 or 6 big goals, and that's gonna be the strategic plan. And then we're going to leave it up to the superintendent to work with their team to determine, okay, so the board has said increasing academic achievement is the goal. We have determined, looking at all of our test scores, looking at what we know about the district, that math is going to be the focus, okay? And specifically, it looks like, we're doing pretty well in math in, K, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And then, and this is not uncommon, this happens in a lot of districts, 6th grade is kind of where, boom, all of a sudden they hit a wall. Say, okay, so what happened, right? We're cruising along pretty well, and then all of a sudden, boom, we hit 6th grade, we hit a wall. All right, so maybe that needs to be our focus. We need to figure out how we address things in 6th grade so that we can get over that wall and then prepare kids, because then 7th, 8th, 9th, then we start getting into the higher levels of math and everything else. So we've identified that 6th grade is our wall. Okay, so we're going to focus on increasing achievement in 6th grade math, and what do we need to do? Then we start working that process. Okay.
Should that all be in the strategic plan, though, or is that more like?
It can be part of the strategic plan, but I mean, the overall strategic plan is going to be, pretty much, these are the big goals we've set, and then underneath, these are the things that we're looking for. But once we get too granular, that's not necessarily going to reflect itself in the plan. Generally speaking, what we normally recommend is, okay, for the first year, these are the things we're going to be focused on for the first year. Okay, and that's where we're going to get into that granularity. And then in the second year, okay, based on everything we've done in the first year, okay, we can check off this, check off this, check off this. Now this is where we're working on the second year, and then the third year, and then the 4th year, and then the 5th year. And usually it's right around the 5th year that we start to think, okay, well, let's see where we are. And now we need to check off 3 of these 5 goals, and let's take these 2, carry them over, and let's develop 3 more, and on and on and on.
What's a typical timeline you see for, a district to develop a strategic plan?
They're usually 3 to 5 year plans.
Well, but like how much time?
To actually develop?
For
It's something that we would usually, it's going to be anywhere from 10 to 14 weeks. It really just kind of depends on the process that you decide. The process that MASB has developed is usually right around a 12 to 14 week process for the development of a strategic plan. And ours is lined up with the MyKIP, which is the Michigan, help me.
Continuous improvement plan.
Thank you. I just call it MyKIP because I don't even know the rest of the acronym, but anyway, thank you. So it's perfectly, it's aligned, we work to the same, to align with the school improvement plan, with the MyKIP plan. And yeah, it's generally around a 12 to 14 week process. It involves your community, it involves your staff, it involves your students, it involves the board, it involves administration. I mean, everyone's involved in the process. We have, we feel, and we've got research to back this again, that if we're going to be successful in setting these goals in this plan, we need to make sure that we're getting everyone's, at least as much input as we can from everybody. Because if they're going to embrace and adopt the plan, they need to feel that they had a say in it. If we, as a board administration, just say, okay, here's a strategic plan, go, and we didn't consult with our teachers and our staff and our parents and our community, it's not going to go over well. Because they won't support something they didn't have a hand in creating. But if they were consulted during that process and feel that their voices were heard, then we're going to go a lot further. And let's face it, it's the teachers that are going to have to implement this stuff on a day-to-day. So it wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense to not consult them as we start to develop that plan. Okay, policy. So when it comes to policy, the superintendent's going to advise the board on policy development, its need and the impact. Superintendent's going to support the board in implementing the policy review, and then is responsible for creating and implementing those administrative procedures. So once you put that policy in place, then it's up to administration to create those administrative procedures in order to carry out those policies that you set. As a board, you're going to develop and adopt that policy, make sure that it's consistent with current law and align your district vision. You're going to create and implement the schedule and the protocol for policy review like we talked about, and then you're going to make sure the superintendent has developed those administrative procedures that are aligned through those board policies. So again, first reading, discussion, get your questions answered. Second reading, vote, hopeful adoption of that policy. And then once that policy has been adopted, superintendent will then write the administrative guidelines to follow that policy, and then just kind of let the board know, hey, by the way, that policy that you adopted last month, Here's the preliminary writing of the administrative guidelines for that, and you're off and running. Okay. Educational program. Superintendent's going to establish those standards that are consistent with state law and your strategic plan, your district vision, your goals. They're going to recommend those courses of study. So when the superintendent brings forth a recommended change in curriculum, a recommended purchase of materials, whether it be books or software licenses or whatever else, as a board, we ask very simple questions. Why? Why this program, right? What we expect to hear, what we hope to hear, what I'm sure you will hear, is that, well, this is a program that is research-based. This is a program that this district have been implemented, and they've seen this increase, right? There's going to be a good reason for the change in curriculum, and there's going to be a good reason for that particular curriculum. What we don't want to do as a board is what I saw one board do. So curriculum director, superintendent brought forth a recommendation to the board, said this is the curriculum. They then hired an outside firm to evaluate that decision. The outside firm, after they paid them quite a bit of money, confirmed exactly what the superintendent and curriculum director had brought forth to them, and they ended up passing it anyway. So they bypassed their superintendent and curriculum director, went to an outside firm to then only find out that they had the same exact recommendation that their curriculum director and superintendent had. Why are we hiring a superintendent and a curriculum director if we're going to bypass them by going to an outside firm? So again, superintendent brings forth the curriculum, brings forth the textbook purchase, whatever it is. As a board, we're concerned with why we chose this. Does it seem like they took the appropriate amount of time and research to decide that this was the best choice? Is it within our vision and goals that we've set? Do we have the money for it? Does everything make sense? And if it does, then we're off and running, right? And so as a board, we're going to support the superintendent in the decision that they made, that they brought forth to us. Superintendent's going to monitor system efficacy and provide that student assessment data for us. As a board, we're going to make sure we have those established standards that are consistent with state law and district vision. We're going to approve those recommended curriculum tax assessments as long as they're aligned to the standards. We're going to review and evaluate performance and then make sure that we're seeing those increases that we expect to see. Now, I'm not a big fan of bringing business into education, so I use ROI reluctantly, but on this particular, it makes sense, right? Return on investment. So we put all this time and money into training our teachers on this new curriculum, on buying the software, the textbooks, the computers, whatever it is, and then we implemented it. Did we see then a resultant increase in academic achievement? And if we didn't, why? Let's have that discussion. Why all that money and time did not increase student academic achievement? What did we miss? What do we need to change? What adjustments do we need to make? And so that's, again, up to us as a board to kind of monitor those things along the way and expect from our administration that we're getting those reports and those updates. Okay? All right, employment. So as the CEO of the district, as the superintendent, they're acting as a board's agent in implementing that district vision that we talked about. They're working towards meeting the district and performance goals that have been established by the board. They're managing and overseeing all of their day-to-day district operations. They're working collaboratively with the board to ensure that we have effective governance. And they're engaging in ongoing and meaningful professional growth opportunities themselves. As a board, we're going to hire a qualified superintendent. We're going to establish clear performance expectations for her. We're going to work with our superintendent collaboratively to ensure that we have that effective school district governance, and we're going to evaluate the performance on an annual basis. Okay? So specifically for our new board members, how do we feel about our preparedness when it comes to evaluating the superintendent? When's your evaluation scheduled for?
December, I'm in a December cycle.
December cycle, okay. So it's a little early. You've been on the board since January. Evaluation isn't until November, December. But have you been through the training for the evaluation instrument yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
The new board members have not.
New board members have not.
Yeah, 4 of us have.
Okay. So sometime in the not too distant future, there's both online opportunities and face-to-face opportunities to get yourselves trained on the evaluation instrument. And it's important that you're trained sooner than later, just so that you can then kind of wrap your head around as you're working through the rest of the, the rest of the fiscal year or the rest of the calendar year here, You can kind of wrap your head around how the things that the superintendent is providing to you kind of fall within her evaluation, so that when it comes time for that evaluation in November, December, you're ready to go.
We plan to do one probably sooner rather than later, because I think we're gonna also do a mid-year review.
Yes, so you have to do a
Yes, we
mid-year
have
review.
to, yes.
Yep, by law, you have to have that mid-year review, so yes, I would encourage you to have the new members trained before you have that mid-year review for sure. And that mid-year review, I just did one last night. We've been doing quite a few of those with districts because this is the first time round with the mid-year review. So that is a service that we do offer, so if that's something you're interested in, let me know and we can figure out how to make that work for you, for sure. But yeah, so as new board members, make sure you get trained in the evaluation instrument, understand the evaluation instrument, get all your questions answered about it so that when it comes time, you're ready to go. All right? Okay, when we talk about staff, superintendent's going to propose employment policies to the board. They're going to recommend all the personnel to be hired. They're responsible for either directly or indirectly conducting those performance evaluations. They're ensuring that comprehensive professional development plans are in place for staff, consistent with laws and district goals. As a board, we're going to adopt those policies governing employment practices, salary schedules, merit pay, terms and conditions of employment. I mean, perfect example of this just happened, right, tonight. I mean, that was a perfect example of exactly what should happen. Superintendent brings forward the recommendation. You asked the appropriate questions. You looked over the materials that were provided to you. It was fantastic. That's how it should happen every time, okay? Everything was well thought out, I thought. I thought you had a nice discussion about it. That's what should happen. For the most part, not for the most part, completely. We're expecting our superintendent to make the appropriate decisions as it relates to the hiring. We as a board are only responsible for hiring and evaluating and hopefully not, but at some point, maybe. But that's all within us as a board, right? That person right there, that's our responsibility. Everybody else in the district is her responsibility. We need to make sure as a board that we've got the appropriate policies and practices in place in order to support her in the decisions that she needs to make related to employees. Make sure that we're setting aside the appropriate amounts of money to pay and give bonuses to and all that kind of stuff, and keep our employees and our union groups happy. That's where we kind of come in as a board along those lines. And then when it comes time for those unfortunate disciplinary actions, making sure that the superintendent is following the protocols and the policies that we have in place, all of that. That's our responsibility, is kind of monitoring those things and making sure that they're being done the way that we expect them to be done. All right, speaking of budget, superintendent's going to recommend and administer those policies. They're going to create and implement that process for budget prep and monitoring, develop and propose a budget to the board, making those revisions along the way as requested by the board, and then administering the budget that is eventually adopted by the board. As a board, we're going to adopt policies related to budget creation and management, review the budget, ensure alignment to district goals, and verify reliability of assumptions upon which the budget is based. So again, superintendent creates the budget based on the vision that we as a board have set, and then brings that budget to us. And as a board, we ask the appropriate questions, make sure that we understand why this number, why that number, where do we get these projections from? You say we're going to be up 50 kids, down 50 kids, where's that coming from? How do we determine that? Whatever it is, get those questions answered, and then suggest any adjustments that need to happen. Remembering that all of this that we've been talking about tonight, strategic planning, budget, whatever it is, when I say we as a board, I'm talking about a majority of the board, right? That's how we do things. There are 7 members of the board. If 4 members of the board say this is the way we're going, that's the way we go, because that's what a majority of the board has determined. Ideally, on most of these things, we want to come to consensus and show support as a board, get our questions and whatever it is that we have, and get our questions and issues dealt with to the best of our ability, knowing that we're not going to win every battle that we put forth, but doing our best to show that as a board, we've come to consensus on this issue. Okay?
So can I just clarify that?
Absolutely.
So the superintendent presents the whole budget, and the board is responsible for reviewing, asking questions, and adopting it. The board should not be presenting their own budget or like doing line
Not generally. Now, as a board, we can put forth, if we have some goals that we want to put forth for the budget, or we have input into some ideas that we'd like to put forth, we can definitely put forth those ideas and whatnot. But I don't know that it's really incumbent upon the board to come up with their own budget per se. That's why we have a superintendent. That's why we have a soon-to-be installed CFO for you all. That's their work, is to put that all together for you, and then we're going to ask all those appropriate questions and make sure that we get those questions answered. Okay. All right, facilities. Superintendent's going to analyze, interpret, communicate the needs of the system to the board. Sounds like you've got a bond coming up. I'm assuming that a lot of that is relevant to the facilities that you have, right? We're going to develop and maintain that district facilities plan, recommend supervise those renovations and those new construction projects, and then champion those funding initiatives as directed by the board. As a board, we're going to make sure that alignment of district facilities to our visions and goals. We're going to approve and monitor those facility improvements, and then communicate those construction plans to the community. So once is there wood around here to knock on somewhere? All right, anyway. Once we get past that process of the bond, and we successfully passed that bond, we're going to get regular updates as to the progress that's being made on those bonds, and then making sure that we're reporting that back out to the community, the parents, the staff, so everyone knows what's going on. As a board member, I've been through bonds, and in fact, we even had a committee that we set aside specifically for the bond. It was a bond committee, and so that committee was set just when we had that bond. Once we spent the bond, we dissolved that committee. So that committee only existed while we had that bond. And so that committee then met with the superintendent on a regular basis to go over the progress that was being made in the bond. Then that committee brought that report back to the whole board. Okay. Now, if you decide to go that route, all right, do you have committees currently?
Yes, and we have a bond committee.
You do have a bond
We
committee?
have a bond committee that's meeting, we've had one meeting, we have 3, maybe more to go to come up with the needs that we think that the district has.
Okay. What other committees do you have aside your bond?
We have a standing committee for facilities and a standing committee for policy.
Okay. And are your committees, do you think your committee structure is working for you?
I think so.
Okay. Others? Do you think the committee structure is working for us?
Oh, we're like
Yeah, it's new.
two meetings into it on each of them, so.
All right.
I'm
So this is why we put forth for committee. So it's, I don't want to say it's 50-50. It's hard to say exactly what it is. I know that I think we've started to see moving away from having as many committees. I can think of boards that had 11 and 12 and 13 committees, which is, by my estimation, about 7 too many. 5 seems to be about the sweet spot, if you're going to have committees. But we've started to see some boards that are kind of moving away from committees and moving to committee of the whole. And one of the reasons for that is because what they discovered was the whole purpose of having the committees is to hopefully we educate that committee on what's going on. That committee then brings that recommendation to the board. The board says, okay. The board puts trust in that committee to put forth an appropriate proposal. And then we support the committee. If we find ourselves questioning everything that the committee brings forward to us, then I don't know why we wasted time having a committee, right? If at that point we're kind of taking away all the work that the committee has done. And so if that's the case, then we might as well go to committees of a whole. Committees of a whole basically means that instead of having those individual committee meetings, everything is just presented to the entire board at the same time. The downside to that is it does mean that your individual board meetings can get cumbersome. Because if you've got the committees, then that's a separate meeting just for those committee members. They bring that report back to the board during your regular board meeting, and maybe it's a 5 to 10 minute report from the committee head, or whoever's chairing that committee, and then the rest of the board asks a couple questions, okay, and we move on to the next, right? If we have to bring everything to the entire board, then it does run the risk of making our board meetings kind of cumbersome. So if we have the committee structure and it's working for us, then we just need to make sure that we're embracing it, making sure that it's effective for us. If it's not working for us, then we need to have that discussion as a board and determine maybe we want to get away from the committees and maybe moving to a committee role. So just something to kind of keep in mind as we're working through this. Okay. And we do offer, usually once or twice a year, we have a workshop specifically around committees and board scheduling and all those kinds of things related to the board work when it kind of comes to setting a calendar and all the things related to that. So if that's something you're interested in, we usually offer that in the fall. And we dive into that in a much deeper conversation for sure. Okay, community relations. So the superintendent's going to recommend and implement a program of school community relations, keeping all the groups informed about what's happening in the district. As a board, we're going to adopt those policies. We're going to advocate for the public school system, and we're going to remain responsive to community ideas and needs. We as board members, we are that connection between the district and the community, okay? And we need to take that responsibility. I think we need to, I think it's important. I think we need to make sure that we remember that we are that connection between the district and the community. And so how we behave in our meetings, how we behave in our social media, how we behave during election season, all those things matter. And I think we need to think about how we would want to, reflect on our community, how we want to present to our community, make sure that we're keeping that in mind when it comes to our actions related to that. Okay? Yeah.
So can you explain a little bit more about being responsive to community needs? Because I'm sure this happened when you were a trustee as well. Parents will come up and have a specific complaint, and usually my response is just, you need to talk to the principal first. The response from the principal, you need to talk to the deputy superintendent, go up the chain of command. But I know there's been some, there's been some tension about, should we just not respond at all? Should we, redirect them? Should we try to help them with their problem?
Sure. So the golden rules that I usually played by when it came to that was, the first one was, I never made any promises, right? I'm never going to say, well, I'm going to look into this and get this taken care of. Because that's a one-way trip to nowhere, right? Not a good thing. So I generally would then listen to them, empathize with them, and let them know, what? So let's think about, what have you done? What processes have you followed? Have you talked to the teacher? Well, I tried to talk to the teacher, and that really didn't work. And I said, okay, so did you, try to talk to the building principal? Well, this. All right, well, you know what? I will reach out to somebody, have them get a hold of you, and kind of go from there. And so then I have that conversation with the superintendent. Hey, you ran into this parent. They said that they talked to the teacher, said they talked to the building principal. Can you keep reaching out to them and talk to them and see what you can do to help them out, right? And so that's a general process that I'm going to follow. Again, I didn't promise anything other than the fact that I would make sure that someone from the district got a hold of them and addressed the issue that they had. One of the things we have to remember is that if we think about the size of our community and we think about the 1 or 2 or 3 individuals that come to us with an issue, when they come to us with that issue, is that something that is relatively specific to them? Is it something that's relatively specific to them and maybe 10 people that they know? Or is it something that is truly representative of how a majority of our community feels? And so anytime we kind of hear those people, we have to kind of think to ourselves, okay, so how many people are they really speaking for? And in some instances, like my kid was bullied, well, that's something that's probably specific to that parent. But that doesn't mean that it's not happening to other kids as well, right? And so we definitely want to address that. But there are some other things that may be something that is specific to that one individual. Doesn't mean that it's not important, but it also doesn't mean that we need to change everything that we do in order to accommodate that one person. So we can do what we can to help out that one person. But before we start changing policies and everything else, we need to make sure that it's not just something that reflects that person. Maybe it is a bigger problem. Then we can think about making changes in policy and whatnot. Okay. Yeah.
I have a question. This kind of goes to board norms, in my opinion, right? Like if we're talking about our community relations and how we conduct ourselves,
Yes.
that would maybe be wrapped up in some board norms that we would all agree upon.
For sure. Yeah, and that's especially relevant when we talk about our interactions with the community, when we talk about social media, when we talk about how we comport ourselves during board meetings, all those things, right? I can think of, so, I don't know, do you have, generally speaking, at your board table in front of you, do you have a laptop or an iPad or something along those lines with agenda on it and things like that, right?
Yes.
So one of the things that as board members we have to keep in mind is that if we're sitting there on the computer the entire time, people in the community don't necessarily know that that's because we're reading through the agenda or that we're doing a little bit of fact checking and whatnot, or that we're playing solitaire, right? I mean, they don't really know. So we just kind of have to be aware of our body language and how we're purporting ourselves, when we're up there at the board table, because all eyes are on us when we're sitting up there on the stage, right? And I've been in that auditorium. I know the stage that you all sit at. I know the cameras and everything else. I know the people in the audience. So I've seen it all. So I know that you are being watched, and so we just need to kind of think about how we're comporting ourselves during those meetings, and how that is reflective upon us as a board. So we set norms that you know what, during these portions of the meeting, let's make sure that we're focused in on the presenter, close our laptops, whatever it is, because if someone's coming out to present to us, there's probably not a lot that we need to look at on our screen, so maybe we need to close the laptops or put the iPads down and focus on that presenter and taking the information that they have. Public comment, same way. Want to make sure that we're respectful of the people that are coming up to public comment, we're listening to them. Okay, thank you very much. We're not responding to them at that time, but we're going to take your concerns into account. We're going to make sure that somebody gets back to you and addresses your concerns, all of that. Okay. All right, so as we talked about, boards are kind of looking at this, big picture, that 30,000 foot view. Overseeing the district, the organization, how parts relate to the whole, focusing on the community's needs, looking at that long-term 3 to 5 year plan, providing that overall structure, setting the clear targets for improvement. Our administration is looking at the whole picture, that 10,000 foot view. They're overseeing the schools and the departments, coordinating the components, working on those constituent groups, looking 1 to 3 years ahead, providing that structure, and then creating and deploying plans to improvement. Then we have our teachers, the localized view, the point of impact for the children, right there on the ground, right? Overseeing classroom departments, teaching teams, coordinating specific parts of the organization, the focus on students. They're looking at days, weeks, months, maybe 1 year ahead. They're providing that classroom structure, and they're refining and adjusting their plans for improvement as they go. As I said, I started my career as a teacher longer ago than I want to think about. The use of computerized grade books was just starting to happen as I was starting to work my way out of the profession. So when I was a teacher, we were still using paper grade books with the ruler to make sure that you had the same student all the way across the line, all that kind of stuff, right? I can't even imagine having the data that teachers now have available to them where they can just pull up a student at any given point, as long as they're entering the scores and everything into the into the grade books and whatnot, but being able to pinpoint the students that are making progress and students that aren't on a relatively instant basis, right? Again, data in, good data in, data out, garbage in, garbage out. But if we're putting in the appropriate data, we're monitoring that data, we can have a pretty good idea as to the progress we make for students. As a teacher, that's incredibly powerful. And I think about the advantages that would have provided to me back when I was a teacher. It's amazing. But that's why they're focusing on that days, weeks, months, right? They're focusing on that day-to-day because they're right there on the ground.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to
Yeah.
head to a swim bank. Quick,
Yeah,
so
no worries.
Excuse myself and duck out.
Sure. Good to see you.
Thanks.
That's it.
I'm going to slow walk it, but I got to.
All right, so our board members have been on the board for a little bit. Have you done a board self-assessment ever or recently?
We haven't done one in the last 2 years. I
Okay.
think we may have done one 3 years ago.
Okay, so I think that one of the things we like about a couple things we like about board self-assessment, right? Fosters that healthy dialogue. Kind of gives us an idea, a check-in as to where we think we are as a board. Improves our understanding of our roles and responsibilities. Helps gather the perceptions of all the board members. Identifies our next steps forward for board development. And helps us demonstrate continuous improvement. As part of the superintendent evaluation process, we expect the superintendent to conduct a self-evaluation of her performance. She sits down and says, this is how I feel like I'm doing. So we think it's only fair that if we expect that of the superintendent, that it's not unfair to expect that of ourselves. Because we have some new board members on, my general recommendation is probably sometime maybe this summer, after they've been on the board for about 6 months or so, we think about looking at a board self-assessment and kind of set that baseline. The nice thing about doing it about 6 months from now is it's going to tell us a couple different things. So one of the options in the board self-assessment is blue, and it's don't know, right? And so if we start to see a lot of blues, a lot of don't knows, then that can be kind of a clue to us, especially if it's coming from our newer board members, that maybe there's some things that we're not taking into account when it comes time for our onboarding of new board members, right? And so we brought these new board members on, and there's all these things that they still don't know. Now, some of it might be because in the 6 months that they've been on the board, they just haven't experienced that, and that's not all that uncommon. But it also may be that it's something that no one ever told them, because it wasn't part of their onboarding process, it wasn't part of their conversations with the superintendent, it wasn't part of their conversations with the board president, and so now we've identified some holes in our onboarding processes, so we can make some changes in our onboarding process to make sure that our new board members now come on, and there aren't as many don't knows. So I can think of a board that I was working with during this process, and they had a lot of I don't knows, and as it turned out, it was right around, they were just coming out of COVID, and they readily admitted that because they were just coming out of COVID, that they did not follow their normal protocols for onboarding their new board members. And because of that, their new board members came on, and there were a lot of things they didn't know. They didn't know who the curriculum director was, because no one sat down with them and talked to them, no one introduced them to the curriculum director, right? And so it's just those little things. And it was, a lot of it was because they had those protocols in place, they had a good, robust onboarding process in place for the new board members, but they just kind of bypassed it because of COVID and everything else. And it was just one of those things that, oh yeah, you know, I guess we never really did sit down with them and talk to them about who the curriculum director was and who was responsible for this, responsible for that, and all that kind of thing. So again, that board self-assessment allows each of the board members to answer the questions and to kind of reflect on their performance as individuals, and then you can kind of look at it all together as how we're doing as a board. So when we have these norms in place, positive negative atmosphere created by the way people in organizations treat each other. Teams have unwritten or written agreements about how they'll behave. They have those behavioral ground rules, often called norms. It helps enable teams to build and maintain that positive culture or shift a negative one. Some sample norms. Very basic. We'll treat each other with respect. We'll be present at all meetings, both physically and mentally. We will listen to learn. Refrain from side conversations. We'll use our time wisely, starting and ending our meetings on time. We'll address challenge ideas. We will address challenge ideas, not people. We will ask questions when in doubt. We'll interpret silence as agreement, and the ever popular no surprises, right? Not from board member to board member, not from board to superintendent, not from superintendent to board. No surprises. If we have an issue, we will talk about it ahead of time, or we're going to shelve it until we can have a conversation ahead of time. We're not going to just kind of burst forth in a meeting with some sort of proclamation for something we're going to do or change or whatever. Any of these norms seem out of the realm of possibility for you as a board? Do you see any of these norms and think, I don't think we could ever do that? These all seem fairly reasonable for you as a board?
They're not very specific.
What's that?
I said they're not very specific.
They're not very specific.
Two items that don't necessarily align with my experience at least at this point is that we will address or challenge ideas and not people. That,
Okay.
Is not necessarily the current case. And then also we interpret silence as agreement. I don't know that there's a shared a shared understanding there.
Sure.
And I think it's worse that some would interpret silence as agreement and others would not. So there's disagreement because we don't know even what silence would mean.
Sure. Okay, that's fair.
Can you explain that one more? Because I would be concerned, I mean, we can't, if somebody doesn't say when they vote, we can't assume that they're saying yes, or is that what that means? If they forgot to say aye, you just assume it was an aye, or?
So I think it's more along the lines of, everyone's given an opportunity to speak, and if you decide not to speak, then you've given up your opportunity to speak. And so if, for me, as a board member, I was generally of the philosophy that if I had something to say, I was going to say it. And if I didn't have anything to say, then I wasn't going to say it. And so I just, that to me sounds bad. I was happy with everything that everyone was talking about. I was just going to go along with the flow, and that's fine. Everyone said anything that I was going to say. Everyone's addressed any of the issues or questions that I had. I'm good to go. I don't feel the need to say something just to say something. If I said something and it was contrary to what a majority of the board believes, well, I've said my piece. They've heard how I don't necessarily agree with what's going on, or how I don't agree with this, whatever it is that's in front of the board right now. But I'm in the minority. So generally speaking, I have my piece. I'm going to go along with what the majority of the board believes, and I'm going to vote, along with the majority of the board. And so that's why generally the boards that I served on were pretty much consensus-based 7-0 boards. I can think of a couple times where we had no votes, and most of those were around, I can think of one instance in which we had a board stipend, and we didn't increase the limit for the stipend, we increased the individual amount that we had per meeting. I think we were getting $25 a meeting, we increased it to $35 a meeting, but we still had a cap of $1,500 for a board stipend. And one of the board members did not want to go on the record as having voted for their own pay increase. And so they voted no. Like, okay, well, that's fine. But I don't see a 7-0 board as a rubber stamping board. I see a 7-0 board as a board that the superintendent did a admirable job of addressing everyone's concerns and bringing forth something, a resolution or whatever it was, that everybody could agree to because they made those adjustments along the way. And so because of that, everyone got what they wanted. And so we're 7-0 on this. Or we got most of what we wanted. And if I get most of what I want, okay, I'm generally going to be pretty good with that. And so I'm going to go ahead and vote along with the majority of the board. If I feel really absolutely positively against something and I want to reflect that, and then it may come forth in a no vote. But I'm going to do everything I can to have all my concerns addressed to the best of my ability, and then I'm going to put those forth, and if they are, for the most part, I'm going to support what the rest of the board believes is appropriate. Okay? All right. Having that supportive structure and that process, those protocols. We know that effective teams discuss and agree on the structures and the processes that we have in place. They follow those processes, and this helps us work together to govern the board. So if we have a process for setting the agenda, we follow that process every time. If we have a process for adding something to the agenda, we follow that process every time. What is your process for adding something to the agenda? Or actually, let's start with, what's your process for creating an agenda for a board meeting?
Dr. Tuttle develops it and then she sends it to me. And if anyone wants to add something, they can call me or email me and tell me they'd like to add something to the agenda.
Okay. So is that process written down somewhere as part of your bylaws?
I think it does say in the bylaws that any trustee can bring forward an agenda item with the consent of the president. Yes.
Okay.
And generally you don't disapprove. Like you usually are fine with adding something to the agenda,
Yes.
even if it's not something.
And the process seems to be working for you.
It has so far.
Okay.
I know that there's also been times when we've made amendments at the beginning, if there's, if there has to be something added.
Okay. Others, feelings on adding things to the agenda, amendments? We feel that.
I think the bylaw is clear.
Okay.
And then the process, I mean, we follow, our bylaws say that we'll follow Robert's Rules of Order. Those are pretty clear.
Okay. All right. And so that's the thing, making sure we've got those processes and those protocols in place, we're following them consistently, and that's what we're looking for. So considerations. Making sure that, during board orientation and development that we cover this material. I remember my first board, kind of my onboarding process when I was first elected to a board, and those of us that have been around education long enough remember there was a time when there used to be inter-district truck, mail truck, right? That would go around and deliver the mail to the individual buildings, and would also deliver the videotapes and all that kind of stuff. And so that inter-district truck would stop by new board members' houses and drop off a file cabinet on their front porch. And in that file cabinet was the 3-ring binder that had all the board policies and everything else in it. And that was pretty much your introduction to board services. You'd come home from work and there'd be a file cabinet on your front porch with the 3-ring binder in there with all the board materials. And then the other drawers were for you to collect all the material that you would get as a board member, because that was long before everything went electronic, right? And that was pretty much the beginning, the middle, and the end of the onboarding process. Not the most effective thing in the world. So we want to make sure that we have an appropriate board orientation and development process, that onboarding process for our new board members in place, and that we are carrying that out consistently. We have that communication, those communication protocols set up. So how are we feeling as a board about our communication? Let's start with our communication superintendent to board. How do we feel about our communication superintendent to board? Are we happy, unhappy, kind of happy, sometimes not?
We have excellent communication, Friday letters, everything that's happening we know about.
Okay.
I love the green, red, yellow alerts.
Okay.
That's really helpful.
All right. So it sounds like we have protocols in place for emergency communications, like something that we need to get to the board today, something happened in the district, bomb threat, whatever it is. we as a board have a process, or the process superintendent, the board, and we're good with all that. That's fantastic. That's good stuff. All I ask is just, and I say this to every board that I work with, we just need to remember that they're dealing with it in the now, and so we need to give them some grace and allow them to deal with it, knowing that eventually they're going to get around to letting the rest of us know what exactly it is that's going on. But we have to remember that they're dealing with it in the now. And so all that stuff that we start to see popping up on Facebook and Twitter and everything else it is what it is. It used to be, the old saying was, we want to hear about it from the superintendent before it hits the evening news. Well, that's pretty much out the window, right? Because it's going to hit social media 9 times out of 10. You're going to get a text message, you're going to see something on social media before the superintendent hasn't had an opportunity, because again, they're dealing with it in the now, right? And so eventually they're going to get to you, but they're dealing with it in the now. Maybe, hopefully, they're able to offload that to somebody else to kind of give you an update as to what's going on while they're dealing with it in the now. But again, just asking that you have a little bit of grace for that. Yeah.
Well, not in this case. I feel like I've been under both. I've been under a situation where we never knew, and we were getting the emails and the Facebook stuff and phone calls from our neighbors, what's going on. And now we know right away. So right away we can handle it and ask. I just want to say thank you for both.
Fantastic. Okay, good deal. Information okay, so superintendent board, how about board to superintendent? How do we feel our communication is from board to superintendent?
I would say good.
Okay, appropriate?
Appropriate. I try to run everything through the president.
Okay.
It's kind of been my flow.
All right. And what about board to board? Board member to board member? Are we cognizant of OMA when it comes to?
No, we're not. That's why I had to stop. I tried to send things out to board members, and then there was the reply all, so I stopped doing that because I kept getting reply alls, which I know was a OMA consideration.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So generally speaking, best practice is BCC. So that helps. It helps, not always, but it helps alleviate the reply all to some extent. And remembering one-way communication is not a violation. It's only when we start having that communication back and forth, that's when we start getting into a violation. So,
is that also a problem on social media if there's board members that are interacting on social media with multiple board members?
So, not a lawyer. Brad doesn't like it when I play a lawyer. So what I will say is that you're definitely opening yourselves up to somebody making a case for it. I mean, there's always that possibility that somebody decides to start taking some screenshots and decides to reach out to somebody at the local level and say, hey, you know what, does this violate open meetings, right? And so are they having conversations on social media about board business that they should be having in an open meeting? And so that's why I would generally recommend that we kind of stay away from that to the best of our ability, because we don't even want to get to the point where we're putting forth that possibility that maybe we're violating Open Meetings Act.
When you say stay away with it, meaning that there shouldn't be social media posts about board business?
So my general recommendation on social media as it relates to board is, hey, did you see this great athletic thing happening? Hey, did you see this great academic thing happening? Hey, were you at the board meeting tonight? We talked about this, right? When we start getting into discussions back and forth about the pros and cons of that decision, or how we feel about that decision, or things of that nature, then we're starting to probably skirt a little bit closer to violations than I would be happy with. So what I did in my board postings related to social media, it was basically just kind of, hey, went to the musical, it was fantastic, highly recommend you go, here's a link to get yourself tickets, right, that kind of thing. Or I saw this, or I saw that, or hey, we had this discussion at the board meeting night, I thought it was a fantastic discussion, have any questions, feel free to email me or call me, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it, right? But I'm staying away from having actual direct responses back and forth, just because it leads, to getting close to skirting that, kind of deal, and then also not generally very productive. And so I kind of stay away from it. But that's me.
It sounds like the opinions are more the issue. Like if you're just saying factual, here's what we discussed at the board meeting, that these things were voted on, not an issue. But if you're saying like, personally, I didn't like this, and here's why, that could be.
That's generally it, yeah. When we have our open board meetings and we have an opportunity for comment during board meetings, that's our time, that's our space in which to say those things. Once we've voted on it, it's been voted on, and I'm ready to move on to the next. If I was on the plus side of that vote, fantastic. If I was on the other side of that vote, it is what it is, but a majority of the board decided that this was the decision. And so, I had my piece. I said what they need to say during the meeting. I don't need to rehash all of that again on social media.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I want to use your example of a hypothetical protocol of a first read, we get all our questions answered in between, and then there's a second read and a vote, right? So what are our theoretical, right? What are some example communication protocols where we get those questions answered efficiently, right? So if the questions are for the president, are we expecting her to have an individual conversation with all 6 trustees to avoid this? Or, the email issue and replying all has been a problem. So in your experience, what was that fact-finding and question and discussion in between meetings?
Sure.
What does that look like?
So general recommendation for any kind of question related to anything like that, we start with our board president, and if the board president does not feel comfortable, then that question then goes to the superintendent. The response coming from either the board president or the superintendent is generally something along the lines of, I've had a question from a board member regarding the policy, here's the question, here's my answer. And that goes to every board member, right? So then you get your question answered, and there's a pretty good chance that somebody else had a similar question, and so now we've addressed it all. Now, as long as that's where it starts and stops, we're good to go, because that was question, one-way response, we're good, okay? And then we can move on to whatever else, other questions that we may have. Or it may even be, I got a series of questions from board members related to that policy, here are the answers to those questions. And now and if you need clarification, then you, just yourself, would go to the superintendent or to the board president and ask for clarification on that particular question that you have clarification on. But we recommend that communication to all board members whenever there's a question. Well, thank you. So that everyone's questions are answered, and then we avoid that back and forth, because generally speaking, like I said, someone's probably going to have a very similar question to yours as well. Okay. Does that answer your?
It does, yes. Yeah. And then the handling complaints and concerns, I think Trustee St. John kind of alluded to this as well. When any number of different stakeholders is coming with a specific question, right? The protocol is, do you think that we should put some effort into having something that is written about how we take care of this kind of?
Absolutely. The big thing to remember is chain of command. Chain of command, chain of command, chain of command. So if a parent comes to you with a complaint about a teacher, as board members, we don't go to the teacher. That's not our role, right? As board members, we respond to that parent. You know what? I'm really sorry about that. Have you talked to the teacher? Have you talked to the building principal? Have you gone to the superintendent, right? Kind of, and if they're, I talked to the teacher, I didn't get the, relief I was looking for. I talked to the principal, that didn't really go all that well. I don't really feel comfortable talking to the superintendent. You know what? Let me reach out to the superintendent and have a conversation with them, and then either the superintendent or I will get back to whatever it is, right? But again, making no promises, everything we talked about. But making sure that we have that chain of command in place. That remembering, we only have that one employee, the superintendent. So if there's an issue with the teacher, that's for the superintendent to deal with, not us as board members. If there's an issue with the building administrator, again, that's for the superintendent to deal with, not us. If there's an issue with the CFO or with my buddy Roy here, right? If there's any kind of issue with any employee in the district, that is up to the superintendent to handle. Now, we want to make sure that the superintendent then reports back to us, okay, so I addressed the issue, this is what happened, that kind of thing, or at least give you as much information as they can. Remembering again that depending on what it is, there may be some HR policies in place and whatnot, that there may be some information that they're either unwilling to share or don't want to share just because we're looking, not looking to violate any kind of, anything else, right? But again, remembering that the only employee we have is the superintendent. Everybody else is her responsibility.
So what commonly, at least for me to this point, what I hear commonly is they know that there's this chain of command expectation before they ever come to me, right? So they say, I emailed everybody, nobody responded, right? I can't verify that. No. I'm not going to ask the person to show me all of the unanswered emails or calls or whatever, right? So it's not about that. I just think it would be simpler for me if it's an open request, if I said this is who you should talk to next, right? Or some. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. And so generally in that case, I understand. Well, no, I mean I've emailed everybody. Did you really though? No, you probably emailed one person, you didn't get a response, and then you decided to just come write me. They feel comfortable with you because they know you, because you're a parent just like them, you're a community member just like them. They feel comfortable talking to you about that. I get all that, and that's fantastic. I'm really happy that you're willing to come to me with this. I will look into this for you. I will get back to you. And then you go to the superintendent and you say, well, okay, now they said that they emailed everybody. The superintendent looks into this as well. No, there was one email sent. Okay, so now you know at least that, and so now you can feel better about the fact that this person was probably, and so then you can report to the superintendent, okay, well, they said they emailed everybody, but could you just reach out to them or have somebody reach out to them and talk to them and kind of figure out what this problem is and have it resolved?
If anybody else is getting the volume of these types of requests that I get, then the superintendent would do nothing but follow up on these email requests. So
Yeah.
this is what I mean about having some
Sure.
a defined process or protocol.
Sure, and then again, and you need to make sure that you're working with the superintendent to determine what her policy is and what, how she's handling these things and who she's offloading these things to, Roy, and then just kind of, go from there, right? And so, again, it's going to be a discussion that we as a board and superintendent have to make sure that, that these things are being addressed, because you're right. I mean, it can be overwhelming. I mean, she could spend all day answering emails from concerned parents, I'm sure, right?
That's a true statement.
Well, it's not really parents a lot of the time. It's just
Anybody.
With everybody.
Yeah,
Community
absolutely.
members.
Community members,
It's overwhelming.
staff members,
Yeah.
sure, you bet.
Well, we've had a case where a parent emailed the board about a complaint about a teacher, and one of the board members responded telling them to wear rose-colored glasses, and it was pretty inappropriate, and then, of course, that parent got very upset. And we probably shouldn't answer those emails, just saying.
Sorry, are you talking about the parent who's trespassing?
No, the parent that you said that they had a problem, and then you said that rose-colored glasses, that you just sent your kid to school.
But
Okay, I'll post it later. We can.
So generally speaking,
yeah,
in
we
those
had a
kinds,
parent who had to be forbidden from school grounds. I don't know what had to do with it.
so generally in those responses, you got reminders
Yeah,
coming
sorry,
up.
that's my calendar.
No worries, no worries.
So I gotta go to my next meeting.
Yeah, there you go.
Keep going, keep going.
What's up? So with regard to those types of emails, we want to make sure that we've elected one person as our board president to respond to these kinds of things, or to work with the superintendent to respond to these kinds of things. And so as individual board members, we're going to defer to our board president. That's one of the benefits of being elected board president, is that they get to handle these things on behalf of the rest of the board. That's why we elected, one of the many reasons that we elected them to be board president. So the board president will then work with the superintendent to make sure that these kinds of emails and parent concerns are addressed, and then reporting back to the entire board that, okay, so we got this email, everyone saw the email that we got from the parent, because they emailed it to everybody. We're going to let our board president and superintendent handle it, and then report back to us, okay, so that issue that was brought forward to us, this was the resolution, this is what's going on, this is the investigation that's happening, whatever it is. But we're going to defer to our board president and our superintendent to handle these things as a team, and then report back to us. Or if the board president has designated somebody else to handle these things, whatever it is, whatever our protocols are, whatever it is that we've decided, and then just making sure that we're following that through and through. Okay. Public comment. Are we having public comment once or twice during our meetings?
Twice.
Twice. How do we feel about that?
That's what people are used to.
It's what
We
people
go
are
down
used
to
to.
one, they're mad.
I mean, it's sometimes, if we have something big on the agenda, sometimes it's a long meeting, but we've always done it that way, and I think,
Is it once for non-agenda, one
Yes.
for agenda? Do they generally stick to speaking only about agenda items during agenda time and non-agenda items during
well,
non-agenda time?
sometimes people submit both.
Okay. Well, they can. I mean, that's on them.
Yeah, it works for the most part. There's a couple people usually that, don't understand that it's a non-agenda item, but it's been working pretty well.
So, just something to think about. If it's working for you, great, then, no need to make any changes. Something that some boards have started to do is they've assigned a time at the beginning of the meeting for public comment, and they assign a time limit to it, say 15, 20 minutes, something like that. Once that time has expired, they basically put a pause in place. They conduct the meeting, the meeting business that they need to conduct, and then at the end of the meeting, they restart public comment, and then anyone that wasn't able to speak during the front end can now speak during the back end, and they can then, and then we exhaust that until everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Now, the benefit to that is that it allows you as a board to get through the board business that you need to get through as part of your meeting. It allows everyone to have an opportunity for public comment, because they either get it during that first section, and if time runs out and they don't get it in that first section, then they have an opportunity to have that during the second section. It is not a violation of the Open Meetings Act because everyone gets an opportunity to speak. As long as we don't close off that second end. That second end has to be open-ended. That has to go until everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Okay? So we can end that first section at 20 minutes, do our board business, and then have another opportunity at the end for anybody that didn't get it in during that first 20 minutes.
So that means that someone would just like get to speak once, and they wouldn't be limited to non-agenda and
Correct.
agenda action.
Correct.
But if you're gonna take action on something and someone hasn't had an opportunity to speak, does that create a problem? 'Cause
Potentially.
you voted and then they can't speak until after.
Potentially, but you're generally releasing, how much in front of a meeting do you release your agenda?
Friday prior to a Monday meeting.
What's that?
The Friday.
The Friday
prior
prior
to
to.
a Monday meeting.
So we're releasing our agenda on Friday, so they had an opportunity to take a look at the agenda. If they see something on the agenda that they want to comment on, I know they know your phone numbers and your emails. They're gonna reach out to you and hopefully get that information to you. If they don't see the agenda until before the meeting, then they're going to have an opportunity during public comment. If they don't get to it during public comment, then yeah, there is the possibility that you run into that for sure.
So if you have 2 reads, then they could have commented at the prior one.
Very,
That makes sense.
very good, yep. So, okay. And, okay, confidentiality. How are we doing on confidentiality? What happens in a closed meeting is like Vegas, right? What happens in a closed meeting stays in a closed meeting. Are we doing pretty well with keeping everything that happens in a closed meeting confidential? Okay, so, here's the thing. It's one of those things that we expect. If we start to violate the closed meeting, then, anytime we go into closed session, then there's always the possibility that anything we talk about is leaked out. And so it curbs our freedoms as far as we may not feel as free to speak during a closed session because, well, it's just going to get out there anyway, so why bother? And so it can, kind of inhibit us from, being as open as we'd like to be in a closed session. We need to make sure that we're not violating people's privacy and opening ourselves up to lawsuits by mentioning things that happened in a closed session. There's always that possibility that if we leak something from a closed session into an open session and it violates someone's privacy or someone's due process or someone's employment rights, whatever it is, that we have now opened the district up to the possibility of a lawsuit. So generally speaking, not generally speaking, always speaking, what happens in closed session needs to stay in closed session. Beyond closed session, there are things that we as a board, just by us being board members, know that is not necessarily something that is open to the rest of the public. And so we need to make sure that we're protecting confidentiality as it relates to that. When the superintendent lets us know this is exactly why that person was dismissed from their job, that's confidential, right? That needs to stay with us as board members. We know because as board members we know. But that doesn't mean that we then turn around and say, oh, yeah, well, they were fired because of this, right? Because you know. Especially when it relates to very popular teachers, very popular coaches, whatever it is, they're dismissed for whatever reason. And as a board, you're like, well, that's not really, we're not discussing that. We've had the conversations with the superintendent, with our lawyers, with our HR team, whatever it is. They laid out exactly what happened. We supported the decision, and that's all you're going to hear from us on it. We're not going to get into the details of why that person was fired because that's not it. That you elected us to, to carry out those duties, and that's what we're doing. So we're not going to put ourselves in a position where we inadvertently violate, someone's rights like that and then open our district up and ourselves up to the possible lawsuits. All right. Anything else in here under protocol considerations that we've talked about that you think we need to talk more about? We good? All right. So next steps. So we talked a little bit about board self-assessment, and I think board self-assessment would be an effective way for you to all move along. Oh, and here, actually, I'll leave one more for. I have somewhere over there.
Thank you.
Roy, I did have an actually. You bet. All right, so we've got 8 traits on the effective school board. So these are 8 characteristics of boards in high achieving districts. We know that effective school boards, as we talked about, they commit to that vision of high expectations for student achievement, quality instruction. They define those clear goals toward that vision. We know that effective boards have strong shared beliefs and values about what's possible for their students to achieve, and make sure that the system and its ability to teach all children at high levels exists. We know that effective boards are accountability driven. They spend less time on operational and more focused on policies to improve student achievement. This is a big one for me because I've seen way too many boards get into the weeds, as they say, on, well, the basketball uniforms, I think that the tank tops should be orange and the shorts should be black. Or, no, I think that the shorts should be orange and the top should be black. And say, no, that's not a board thing. That's a athletic director thing, that's a booster thing, that's a principal thing. That is not something that the board needs to get themselves in the weeds about. But I've seen too many boards that kind of get into the weeds on that kind of thing. So we need to make sure that we're focused on being accountability driven, spending less time on operational, more time on policies to improve student achievement. Effective boards have that collaborative relationship with staff and the community. They establish that strong communication structure to inform and engage both internal and external stakeholders in setting and achieving those district goals. They're data savvy. They embrace and monitor data even when the information is negative, use it to drive continuous improvement. Where are we on our data? As a board, do we think we get the data that we need in order to make the decisions we need to make? Okay, what you got, Clint?
I don't think that we see the spending results frequently.
We don't have a CFO, so.
Okay.
When we get the CFO, I bet.
And we don't have a finance committee, so that's part of the problem too.
Okay, so some spending priorities, some spending numbers. All right, so hopefully with a CFO, we can start to establish our expectations as a board, working with our superintendent and our new CFO to make sure that as a board, we're getting those financial updates that we need in order to make appropriate decisions related to the budget.
But I did see that plan that was in the Friday communication that looked like it was very robust on a proposed way to get that kind of information out there.
Okay, good. All right, what about other data? Are we getting regular updates as to what student growth is looking like and academic achievement is looking like in the district? Are we getting regular updates as to what our student numbers are looking like?
We had projections by our auditors at the last meeting about student enrollment and building utilization.
Okay. All right, what about academics? No? Not getting regular updates on
We
academics?
don't have a curriculum director, a full-time curriculum director, we're working on that too.
Okay. All right. All right. So once we get that curriculum director in place, once we get that CFO in place, as a board, sitting down with those people, with our superintendent, saying, okay, these are our expectations. And then letting them tell us whether or not those expectations are realistic or not, and then coming to that place where we all agree that yes, this is what's appropriate. Remembering, they have a day-to-day job that they're responsible for, and collecting data for us is not necessarily at the top of their responsibilities. But in order for us to effectively evaluate our superintendent, there are some data pieces that we need. In order to effectively determine appropriate budget, there are some data points that we're going to need. In order to effectively ascertain as to whether or not we're making appropriate academic progress, there's certain data that we're going to need. So as a board, we need to come together, work with our superintendent to determine what our data needs are, and then what the appropriate reporting out looks like, how often, how frequently, how robust, and make sure that we get that information. Okay?
I think there's in that section, I wanted to highlight something that's
Yeah.
written here that I didn't hear you say out loud, is that being data savvy is being able to read it from an objective standpoint and not necessarily with a blaming perspective and looking for creating a narrative or understanding if there's bad news coming and instantly trying to figure out who is to blame. I think it goes all the way back to your first slide of shared purpose. That any one person on our board or in the administration, their success is everybody's success, and their failure is everybody's failure. So we have to increase the visibility of data, not for a blaming perspective, but for a shared continuous improvement, roadmap.
Yeah, absolutely. The numbers are what the numbers are. So now we know what the numbers are, let's figure out how we can make them better, how we can make them more robust, how we can build the bottom line, how we can increase academic, whatever it is, what do we need to do to get from here to there? So yes, we can't be blind to history, we can't be blind to what's happened in the past, we need to learn from what's happened in the past. But once we've learned what's happened in the past and how that can impact our future, then let's make those adjustments. Let's not focus on the past, let's focus on the future. right? Okay. Effective school boards align and sustain resources such as professional development to meet district goals. Professional development is a real pain in the you-know-what these days. It's very difficult for us to find substitute teachers. It's very difficult for us to find that staff time for them to participate in professional development. Do we do early release or
Yes, late start Mondays.
late start Mondays? How's that working?
I think really well.
Okay, good, good. Are they doing PLCs during that time and all that kind of good stuff? Fantastic, fantastic. And so then what it is as a board is to make sure that that is time that's being used effectively, or from a superintendent as to how that time is being used, that it is being effective, and then working with our community to get them to understand, yes, we understand that those late start Mondays are not the most convenient thing in the world for you, daycare, childcare, we get it, we understand, but in order for us to be an effective district, we need to provide some time for these teachers to have their professional development, to get together as a professional learning community and discuss these things and make improvements and everything else. So we understand this is what we think is the best option after talking to people in our community. We think that these, I mean, it used to be, early release Fridays, which sounded fantastic. Parents loved that because they could take their kids home early on a Friday and start their weekend early, except that the teachers also then started their weekends early. So we quickly got rid of, early release Fridays. And then it was Wednesday mornings. Wednesday mornings were very popular for a while, and now Monday mornings are starting to trend a little bit. So lots of different options out there, but probably stay away from the Friday early releases unless you're looking to support the local taverns around town. But that's a discussion for another day. Okay. Effective school boards leading as a united team with the superintendent, each from their respective roles with strong collaboration and trust. Where are we as a board and superintendent working as a united team with strong collaboration and mutual trust? Where do we think we are on that? Scale of 1 to 10. 1 being, nowhere near. 10 being, oh, absolutely. We are a board that trusts each other, trusts the superintendent. We collaborate wholeheartedly for the benefit of the district and the staff and the community and the students. So 1 to 10, what do we think? What do you think, Clint?
I would say 3 or 4.
Okay.
Merging
Yeah,
again.
I think we still need more time. We recently hired our superintendent and we replaced about half the board, so we need time to.
A work in progress?
Pretty agree with that. We have a new superintendent and new board. We also have a lot of new additions to central administration. And a lot of turnover in our central administration.
Okay. What do you think?
Oh, with the superintendent specifically, I'd say a 10.
Okay.
With the board notes.
Okay.
I think it's a work in progress.
Okay.
Having norms, I think, would help us.
Okay.
Superintendent, her team, staff, a 10.
Okay. All right. So, sounds like I said, I think that board self-assessment is definitely be something that's going to help you out a lot. So, I'd say sometime have it, plan on conducting the board self-assessment sometime this summer, and then maybe sometime in August, kind of before the school year really gets going, have a retreat day. And, either evaluate the material yourselves or have somebody come in and walk you through that board self-assessment results and have that, a half-day retreat on just kind of addressing everything in there. I think would be really effective for you as a board to kind of start setting those norms and setting those expectations going forward.
So you definitely recommend us adopting a set of board norms.
Okay.
The other thing is that every board member here has the superintendent tool. Do you also recommend us putting specific other goals in there if that's what we want to do?
So as it relates to evaluation, 99.9% of the things that we expect from the superintendent is going to be found somewhere in that evaluation instrument itself. We also have our MyKid goals because as a district we have to provide MyKid goals to the state. Once we put a strategic plan in place, we're going to have those goals as well. So generally speaking, between the evaluation instrument, the MyKid goals, and then eventually our strategic planning goals, we have more than enough goals to evaluate the superintendent on. If we as a board determine that there's something specific that we want to set a goal for, I generally recommend no more than 2, maybe 3 goals for the superintendent above and beyond everything we just talked about. But even then, making sure that they're not redundant or covered somewhere else. So I can think of a board that brought forth and said, here, these are our 15 goals for the superintendent. I'm like, 15? Okay, let's look at these. And I was able to knock off like 6 of them right off the top, because I'm like, well, this is covered here in the evaluation, this is covered. And so 6 of them right off the top. And then 2 others were kind of redundant on each other. And so by the time I kind of worked with them through those 15, there was really only 2 in there that were kind of above and beyond. One of them was a very specific visibility goal that they had with the superintendent, because this was a superintendent that did not live in the district, and there was a common view from staff and community that come 4:30, the superintendent was out the door, never to be seen again. And so they had a very specific visibility goal for the superintendent. You're going to attend X amount of academic events, X amount of athletic events, X amount of community events. You're going to join X amount of groups, Chamber of Commerce, Lions Club, whatever it is, right? And so they had very specific visibility goals for the superintendent, because that was something that was a concern to the board. I'm like, okay, because visibility is in the evaluation, but they had something very specific that they wanted to do. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's appropriate, right? And so they laid that out, and then they let the superintendent report back to them as to how they were doing with that. And then the board has, made a determination as whether or not they were meeting that goal. But for the most part, there's really not any need to set any goals for the superintendent. We can take a look at the evaluation instrument, we can take a look at the MyKid goals, we can take a look at the strategic plan, and we can say, okay, so for this evaluation cycle, this is what we want you to focus on. But they're goals that have already been established, right? And so for strategic planning, for this year, we really want you to focus on academic achievement.
And is this something that should be done at the board table? Same with the norms, right?
So as part of that mid-year evaluation that we were just talking about, right? Mandated that we have that mid-year evaluation. We can talk about progress in closed session, but when it comes time to talk about goals and moving forward, that has to be done in open session. So in closed session, we can talk about all the progress that's being made. We can have the superintendent report back out to us. Okay, so at the beginning of the evaluation cycle, these were the goals that we had established. This is the progress that we made. And then we end that conversation, we come into open session, and during open session, we say, okay, so for the next 6 months of the cycle, these are the things that we're working on. A lot of times, it's just going to be continuation. We're going to continue working towards that goal of increasing academic achievement. We're going to continue working towards that goal of establishing a master facilities plan. We're going to continue working towards it, whatever it is, right? A lot of it's going to be continuation. There's also an opportunity there for the superintendent to say, these are the things that I need from you as a board in order to support me for the next 6 months. I need additional money for professional development. I need to attend this conference that talks about developing a master plan for facilities, whatever it is, right? Again, all that conversation is going to happen in an open session. So progress, closed, moving forward, setting goals, open. Okay?
I have a question about the norms. You put up some examples. Are there other examples that you have had, or that you would recommend?
Yes, and there's one that I will send to you that we have adopted as protocols for board members. And I'll make sure I get that in the email to all of you. I meant to bring copies of it with me tonight, and I forgot to grab from the office, but I'll get those. It's a PDF. I'll make sure I get that to you for sure. And then lastly, effective school boards take part in team development and training, sometimes with the superintendents, to build that shared knowledge, values, and commitments for their improvement efforts. So that's exactly what you're doing tonight. It's a fantastic step forward. It kind of covers, we know that those teams that learn together, that work together, are more effective. They trust each other more. Hey, if y'all want to come out to Mackinac for our spring conference, love to see y'all out there. It's going to be a great time. It's been selling like hotcakes. So we've got spring conference, we've got fall conference. I encourage you as a board, attend as a board and superintendent our fall conference. Learn together as a team. Those getting together as a whole board and superintendent during a conference does not violate the Open Meetings Act. Well, as long as you're not sitting there at the lunch table, plotting the demise of the district. But no, as long as you're there for the learning experiences, then you can be together in those social events and those learning experiences. That's not a violation. And we'd love to see full boards and superintendents come. We have quite a few districts that do that. So.
Do you recommend us as a board coming to the fall conference?
Always.
Okay.
Always.
What's the cost of something like that? Mackinac Island, so that's pretty darn expensive.
Yeah, so we got a sweetheart deal. So we're actually the opening weekend of Mackinac. And so because it's the opening weekend, they cut us a pretty good deal. So it's not all that different than any of the rest of our conferences that we normally hold.
But the fall one's in Traverse City this year.
Fall one's in Traverse City
as
well. Yep.
I found them to be amazing. There's all this session. I think we pay one cost for us to go there, and I think the district pays for the entrance fee and then the hotel fees, but you give good deals on the hotels,
We
right?
have good deals on the hotels. We also have, so, we generally recommend that, as a board, much like you set aside, in your superintendent's contract, you have an opportunity for professional development. In your superintendent's contract, there's something in there about membership to professional organizations. You have both those things in your contract, right? So generally speaking, there should be a budget line item somewhere in your budget for training for board. And we need to, set an appropriate level, whatever that is. We need to make sure we have protocols and policies in place for how that is spent, how we use that, and then we can also avail ourselves. So, this is our 75th anniversary, and so we have put forth as an association $750 to every district in the state that wants to, and there's I can't remember off the top of my head, but if you go to our website, you can find the information of what you as a board can use that $750 toward. The state also reimburses for a variety. So this class we're doing tonight is something that is reimbursable from the state. So you can put forth reimbursement for every board member that's here tonight, and the state will reimburse $100 towards the cost of this workshop tonight. So there's plenty of opportunities for you to recoup some of the costs for the trainings that you do as a board.
When is the spring conference?
Spring conference is that first weekend in May. Okay.
And there's no problem with us, as far as the OB Meetings Act goes, is socializing up there. The seven of us went
you're in
to
the clear
dinner.
on that.
We're allowed to do that,
You're
right?
in the clear on that. Whenever you're together learning as a team or in a social event as a team, then you are in the clear.
Okay.
I'm not going to go over the roles and responsibilities document here. I'm just giving it to you for your, that's for your board members that are here. I'm just giving it to you for your edification. Is there anything that you were hoping we talked about tonight that we didn't talk about? Anything that's still kind of gnawing at you? Questions you've got related to what we talked about tonight, or related to evaluation, or recipes you'd like to share? What do you got?
Is there anything on the PDF that you're going to share with us that discusses social media norms?
I'm not sure there's anything specific to social media on there, but I believe we do have some protocols around social media, but I can definitely take a look into that, for sure.
We did get a training from Collins Law that was emailed to us. I wonder, are we allowed to then email that, or would President Worden be allowed to email that to the new board members? Or is that like a proprietary thing? I don't know. So maybe you can forward that to the new board members, because that had very specific information about like what the case law was about quorum, even a like constitutes an interaction, stuff. That's why I never comment when you posted about tonight's meeting, so I was like, oh, I'm not gonna share it, I'm not gonna comment on it. It's been said, the information's out there.
Yeah, I'll be happy to forward that.
Yeah, as long as
That was
that's
some good information.
Mhm.
So- This thing here, Jake, is this something that you would conduct?
Yeah. So you as a board would each have a link. You would go into the survey. You would take the survey. All 7 of the board members. Superintendent doesn't take the survey. Superintendent participates in the breakdown of the information. But then, we'll come back and break down the information from you, report it all out to you, and conduct a conversation around it.
And this is something you would recommend we do before a retreat or sometime soon?
Yep. So you can. Taking of the board self-assessment is completely free. Everyone in the state has access to the board self-assessment completely free. And if once you take it, you then want to, as a board, conduct a conversation around it yourselves, that's completely up to you. If you'd like somebody to come in and facilitate a conversation around it, then there is a charge for that. But again, that is another one of those that is reimbursable by the state. So you can get up to $100 per board member reimbursed from the state for that one as well.
That was a summer thing, we thought, after we've been on for
After you've been on for about
6
6 months or so, I think that's a good time for you to kind of take that. And so if you took that in kind of June, July, and then had a kind of a kickoff retreat sometime in August to kind of kick off your school year, then I think that'd be appropriate. Other questions? All right, so I said I think it's around 2 hours, and I got you a little bit under 2 hours. So
Thank you so much.
Even with the
Absolutely.
tech difficulties, good job.
I know. There you go.
There's plenty of food over there.
I'm going to make sure I get something before I walk out the door. Anything along the way, please feel free to reach out. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions related to anything we talked about tonight, or board service, or evaluation, or anything else. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find someone who does. or I'll make it up, one of
Thank you
those.
so much for coming. We appreciate you. You're a great presenter.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for having me out tonight, everyone sign the sign-in sheet.
Dr. Bishop, do you wanna?
No, actually, we're trying to run to a band
Okay.
concert, so.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, we're good, and I'll take care of this later tonight.
So can we help with anything?
We're good. Started seven. Dr. Bishop's daughter's playing, so he needs to go. I've tried to tell him to leave 3 times, but he won't.
Where's the final step? No worries.
Okay, go ahead. Motion to adjourn. I support that. All those in favor?
Laurel supports it.
Oh, sorry.
What do you need? What do you need?
All in favor?
I'm not having nothing.
Aye.
Aye.
And the silence on everybody.